If your farm is having difficulties controlling cereal rust, then this is the video for you. Today we'll be discussing a chemical-free way of controlling cereal rusts. So that includes rust on wheat, oats and barley. And effectively the big problem is that a lot of our cereal rusts are developing resistance to a lot of the fungicides that we use on them. Which means when we do have the resistance to the fungicides, they're not going to be as effective, they're going to be more costly, and we're going to have more losses in terms of yield and quality because of that. But luckily for you, we specialize in using regenerative practices to control pests and disease. Now make sure to stick around because at the very end I'm going to tell you what we can add to our fungicides if we do need to apply them to make them less harmful to our plants. But before we get into that, let's actually talk about what cereal rust is. So cereal rust is a airborne fungal pathogen, and once the spores land onto the leaf surface, they germinate and then start to release different enzymes to break down the cell wall. This allows the rust pathogen to then penetrate into the cell wall, into the leaf, from where it will start to feed on the plant. Now this is a pretty big problem, especially on the flag leaf. So if you have a beautiful crop and then effectively the top of the plant and especially the flag leaf gets infected by rust, what happens is that the photosynthetic ability of the plant significantly reduces. And that is very important because it affects grain fill. So the flag leaf contributes the most of the photosynthate and the carbohydrates to the grain during grain fill. Which means when we have a reduction in photosynthesis, we're going to have smaller size grain. Finally, the most favorable conditions for cereal rust are warm and humid conditions, allowing for effectively the leaf surface to remain wet for longer. This is a perfect environment for funguses, specifically rust, to germinate. And this can be made worse when you have high planting densities. So there's three main types of rust. That's stem, leaf, and stripe rust. You'll see them here, but effectively they're more or less quite similar to each other in terms of the genus of the pathogen. So let's first talk about the typical basic integrated disease management or integrated pest management for controlling rust. So typically we have our genetics, so planting resistant varieties of say wheat to not be as affected by rust. There's good crop rotations, making sure we're not planting the same thing every time. Matching our planting densities to ensure we have a sufficient amount of airflow through our crop. Because if it's too thick, then it's going to increase the humidity of the canopy, leading to potential rust problems. Another alternative control method is to remove an alternative host. So this is removing the green bridge, which is say over summer you have volunteer plants that can be affected by rust, allowing for then that rust to carry between seasons. Now, as all good integrated pest management programs, we need to be monitoring our crop. So field scouting, going out and assessing whether or not you have rust, and then also assessing the economic impact of that rust infection. And if it exceeds the economic threshold, then you apply fungicides. Now, this is a very typical integrated pest management for rust. But that's not the aim of the video. The aim of this video is what can we add to this? So we're not trying to take this away. This is fantastic and a great place to start. But what are we going to add to this to improve this integrated pest management and hopefully allow us to remove the fungicide component of our integrated pest management program? And so behind me we have our, I guess, regenerative control methods. They're going to be microbial in nature and nutritional in nature. The first potential biological control measure is application of trichoderma. Trichoderma is a predatory fungi that you can either apply as a foliar spray or a seed coating. Trichoderma is quite interesting because it has multiple different benefits for the plant. So firstly, it controls a whole wide range of different diseases. So there's over 30 different diseases that trichoderma can help to suppress. Rust is included in that, but it's also beneficial for plant growth and actual soil health too. Now, trichoderma will control rust in three main ways. So the first one is that it releases enzymes to degrade the pathogen cell wall, effectively killing it. It'll also outcompete for nutrients and available space. So on the leaf surface, the trichoderma will come in and outcompete, or try to outcompete the rust. And then finally, it will produce metabolites to inhibit the growth of the fungal spores. Now, trichoderma works on the leaf surface as well as the roots, which is why you can apply as a seed coat or in furrow as liquid inject. And it actually has quite beneficial effects on root development, in addition to increasing nutrient uptake, but also stimulating induced systemic resistance in our plants, which then further helps to resist rust. Now, the cool thing about the application of trichoderma versus, say, a seed coat fungicide is that the fungicide is only going to work for, say, 4 to 6 weeks. That's only a very short time compared to the rest of the crop cycle. Now, this is less important for rust, I guess, but more important for different fungicides that affect the roots. But trichoderma actually lasts for the whole season of the crop. Because it's a living thing, it's self-replicating. It can protect the crop for the whole life cycle, which means you're going to get more bang for your buck, as well as controlling against a whole range of different other diseases, and you get those plant health benefits as well. So in terms of comparing the costs of applying trichoderma versus fungicides, trichoderma does way more than a fungicide. It's also quite general and broad in its control methods, as well as its effect on different diseases. Finally, a really interesting thing I found in the study is that trichoderma actually increased chlorophyll content and phenol content as well. So that would suggest that the application of trichoderma actually increased the photosynthetic ability of the plant. Super cool, also contributing to potentially a yield boost. So the next thing that we can apply is our mycorrhizal fungi. We are at this point pretty well aware of the benefits of mycorrhizal fungi. It's a symbiotic fungi that attaches into the plant root and supplies the plant with a whole range of different minerals, as well as vitamins, plant hormones, autoinducers, a whole range of different things. One of these things is that the mycorrhizal fungi will also improve the plant immune system, which indirectly allows it to resist the rust disease. So the amazing thing about mycorrhizal fungi is that it extends the root zone by about 450 millimeters, or 45 centimeters, allowing the plant to effectively have a lot more minerals and water available to it. This will allow the plant to uptake all these different minerals, which you'll see further in the video are super important for the plant's immune system. Like trichoderma, mycorrhizal fungi also prime the plant's induced systemic resistance to disease, while also increasing plant defense compounds like phenolic compounds and flavonoids. So that's important to, prevent the germination of fungal spores, as well as inhibit the growth of rust on the leaf surface. There's a range of other things that mycorrhizal fungi do to protect our plants. One of them is making it more resilient to abiotic stress factors, so like salinity and drought. During those times, the plant is less stressed, meaning it can still be putting towards energy and effort into defending itself against pests and disease. So in one of the studies that I found, and you can actually see this in the blog component of this video, so researchers tried the application of both trichoderma as well as mycorrhizal fungi, and they found that although both of them were better than, I'm pretty sure nothing, that the combination of the two were actually better than individually. So there's a synergistic effect between having both of these, and in addition to having the disease suppression ability of these two microbes, you also get a whole range of different benefits as well. As we just talked about, mycorrhizal fungi increasing nutrient availability in water, but as well as the trichoderma in terms of stimulating root growth and a whole range of different plant health functions. So this is the cool thing about microbial and nutritional components of integrated pest management, is that they compound and synergize with each other to be better than the individual parts. So we can inoculate our plants with mycorrhizal fungi. That's the best way to do it as a seed coat. But also we need to be using practices that promote mycorrhizal fungi populations. So about 90% of our mycorrhizal fungi populations have been killed off with conventional agricultural practices. So things like no-till, cover cropping, as well as using low salt-based fertilizers will help to bring back our mycorrhizal fungi populations. Mycorrhizal fungi also don't like high analysis fertilizer, and that's specifically nitrogen fertilizers and phosphorus fertilizers. So the last microbial application that we're going to talk about is Bacillus subtilis. Now, this is a bacteria that you can apply as either a foliar spray or a seed coat or liquid inject or as a compost or whatever. Now, this is a really cool bacteria because it provides a range of benefits to our plants. So as well as the disease that we'll talk about in a moment, it provides a whole range of plant hormones, so gibberellins and auxins, as well as increased nutrient availability, especially when it's in the soil. But the main reason that we'll be talking about it here is that it can control rust, and does that through the production of antifungal compounds, such as a few enzymes and compounds called lipopeptides, in addition to stimulating the plant's induced systemic resistance and outcompeting the rust for nutrients and space. So one study showed that the application of Bacillus was able to reduce rust by 65% when compared to the control, whereas the comparable fungicide was only able to decrease the rust by about 55%, meaning that the biological control actually outperformed the fungicide, which is really cool in a variety of different ways. But I think one of the really special parts is that these self-replicate and they reproduce, which means you're going to get coverage of these microbial products for a lot longer when compared to our fungicides. So with that, there was an increase in yield. There's also environmental benefits and other benefits in terms of the Bacillus subtilis actually could protect that plant from other diseases as well. So it's protecting a whole range of things from one application. So like trichoderma, you can apply Bacillus as, say, a foliar spray, seed coating. You can also brew up your own compost and use it as take an extract from it, liquid inject. There's a range of ways you can apply it. Brew it yourself, or you can also buy it from suppliers. So that were the main three microbial applications that we can make to protect our plants from rust. But there's also nutritional ways we can protect our plants from rust as well. So the very first one is taken from a book called A Healthy Crop. Fantastic book. It's actually free. You can go check that out. But the whole idea of the book is that pests and disease only attack plants because they're food source. And specifically, pests and disease are looking for free nitrogen. So that includes any nitrogen, including amino acids, and reducing sugars, which is simple sugars. And so once we are able to rapidly convert all of our free nitrogen into complete proteins, and for that we need magnesium, sulfur, nickel, molybdenum, and boron. And I have a whole video on that you can check out here. It's John Kemp's Plant Health Pyramid. Go check it out. It's on YouTube. Once we can do that every 24 hours and convert all of our nitrogen into complete proteins, we start developing resistance to a lot of pests and disease. And so with that, we start to prevent the plant from actually being food for rust in the first place. So that will be the first part of it. We're going to try and reduce free nitrogen in our sap. So we can do that nutritionally by helping to convert it, but also trying not to front load all of our nitrogen fertilizer at the very start of the season. An alternative to that is maybe applying a small amount at the start and then foliar feeding throughout the rest of the season, or doing split applications, just whatever you can do to spread out the application of nitrogen throughout the season. Likewise, if we do have to front load all of our nitrogen application, what we can do is apply a few different other things. It's like give it a carbon source, sulfur source, and molybdenum, and as well as a microbial inoculant, to then rapidly convert all that nitrogen into microbial bodies so that they can cycle throughout the rest of the growing season. So once we have that in place, we can go on to the next one, which is increased lipid production. This is also in John Kemp's Plant Health Pyramid video, so go check that out as well. But effectively, at a certain point of plant health, plants start to increase their lipid production. Once that happens, the waxy cuticle of the leaf increases, making it harder for the rust fungi to penetrate into the leaf. On a similar note, increasing cell walls with calcium and silicon can strengthen the cell wall. We've got a video on that, so go check that out. In short, those two minerals, it reinforces the cell wall, makes them quite strong, preventing the rust from penetrating into cell wall in leaf. Boron's really important here because boron's required for the translocation of these two minerals into the plant, into the leaf. Without boron, you're not going to have effective transportation. So applying all of three of these together, fantastic, works really well. And it comes back to that synergistic effect. So you can foliar spray these, probably the most efficient way of doing that. Now finally, paying attention to our trace minerals. So all of these have a quite important effect on plant health. So all of these minerals have references in this book, fantastic book, Mineral Nutrition of Plant Diseases and Plant Diseases. Basically, this outlines the last X amount of years of scientific literature and displays them all in reference to the minerals plants require and what disease they affect and the mechanisms of that. So if you check out the blog of this video, you'll see all the different ways that these minerals affect it in probably a bit more of a detailed explanation than what I'll do now. But really quickly, we have potassium. The literature suggests that potassium, although it's not quite well known, the best explanation is that potassium helps to reduce our nitrogen levels. So basically back to this, reduces our nitrogen level in our plant, making the plant less susceptible to the rust infection. Next is sulfur. Sulfur was found to be used in the sulfur-induced resistance of the plant, quite important for controlling fungi. Copper. Copper is actually used as a fungicide as it is. So application of copper can be used as a fungicide, but in this context, we're actually talking about it being applied nutritionally to the plant, and the plant can use it as a fungicide in itself. And so because of that, the plant can use it as use it as a cofactor in a antimicrobial compound to then fight off fungi. But also copper is quite important for cell wall strength as well. So it's used in lignin production, which means the plant cell wall is a lot stronger. Next is manganese. Now manganese is quite important because it's a highly redox affected nutrient. So it has a very strong ability to oxidize, and where you have infection, typically the plant will concentrate manganese to that particular spot and then oxidizing and killing the fungi or the pathogen depending on the disease. So this helps to prevent germination of spores as well as slow the growth of fungi. It also reduces enzyme production of the rust and reduces potential toxins that the rust will pass on to the plant. Next is boron. Now we talked about boron up here, but boron, although it's not quite well known, and they talk about it in the book, it's slightly toxic to fungi. Fungi don't have a high requirement for boron. You got to be careful though applying boron in cereal crops because they have a very low requirement. Nevertheless, fungi basically have no requirement for boron, and it can be quite toxic. But it's probably has a more significant effect in supplying calcium to strengthen cell walls. Next is chloride. Now, typically we don't need to be applying much more chloride as it is. A few references did find that in chloride deficient soils, the application of salt, just straight salt, helped control rust. But really there's not too much literature on that. And finally is nickel. So nickel is found to inhibit the germination of rust spores, and it's suggested that rust is quite sensitive to nickel. Now, nickel is another one you're probably not going to apply as it is, and it is possible to test for nickel in your soil tests as well as your sap tests. Typically not too important, but it can show up. So that's it. That are the regenerative principles or methods that we can apply to controlling rust problems. Now, at the start of the video, I did promise you that we would talk about something we can add to our fungicides to reduce its effect on our plants, and that is the application of a 5% to, I'm pretty sure to the fungicide rather than the whole solution, of fulvic or humic acid. Now, they are humic substances, so they're a carbon, an organic carbon compound, but what it allows the plant to do is effectively rapidly detox the fungicide out of the plant, as well as the rest of our microbiome. Now, this can be helpful in terms of detoxing it, but it doesn't mean that the fungicide won't have any damaging effect on the other beneficial fungi. It will mean that the fungicide won't persist in the environment as long, and it still will be effective against the rust that we're trying to control for. But if we're trying to really increase our plant health, it's critical that we do give our plants a bit of carbon so that it can detox the fungicide, which is effectively a toxin for the plant, out of its system. And so if we do have to apply a fungicide, make sure to apply a bit of fulvic or humic acid, as this will help to, I guess, allow the plant to bounce back a bit faster. Cool, so that was a big video. Quite interesting the way we can use microbials and nutrition in controlling rust. If that sounds like it is up your alley, reach out to us at Agresol. We're more than happy to have a free 30-minute consultation with you to see how we can use some of these in your farm. We also provide differential sap test analysis services, as well as recommendations on microbial and nutritional products. So if you're a farmer in Australia, specifically New South Wales, reach out to us to see how we can help you. Awesome, thanks very much for watching. My name's Till Simmons from Agresol. Cheers.